what's important is the technology. Is it based upon cloud technology, which is pretty much where everybody's going? Is the technology reliable? Is it customizable? If you customize or tailor the software to your requirements, is it upgradable? Is it easily upgradable? And last but not least, on the technology side, what devices does it run on? Over the last 20 years or so, we've been focused on primarily running on Windows environments for small to mid-sized businesses. And now with a variety of things, the cloud has become more important, and having the ability to run this on a Mac or on a Linux machine or any other piece of equipment you have, it could be an Android device, for example, or an iPad. So the idea is opening that up is very important. And so that becomes a scenario of what you should look for. Functionality, it's great to have great technology, but if it doesn't have the functionality you require, it becomes moot. Basically, if you end up having to code a whole thing, that becomes important. With Acumatica, we have a full suite of modules that cover manufacturing and project accounting, construction, route accounting, fleet management, and it's all directly from Acumatica. It's not third-party product add-ons, et cetera. It's directly from them. In addition, they're integrated. So if you are, for example, one of the companies I used to work for was in providing steel for commercial buildings. And so when we were developing the steel to go out in the field, that was actually manufacturing oriented. And then when we actually took it out in the field, it became construction oriented when we went to erect the steel out on the job site. So we had AI billing and things like that went with it. The nice part about Acumatica, not only do we have both of those, they actually integrate together. So we can actually produce things in manufacturing, for example, that ends up on a job site in construction and ends up in the construction on the job. For billing and things. So that functionality, not only is it powerful, but it's integrated. Integration from outside systems, is depending on your organization and your requirements, it's important to have that ability to integrate in and out of the product sometimes. So Acumatica from day one has had web service APIs, so it's fairly easy to integrate to. In addition, it supports OData integration, meaning that in the old days, we used to use ODBC integration to dump things down in the spreadsheets and all. And then that required a little bit different setup and organization. With the OData integration, what that pertains to, if you have a product that's compatible with that, which a lot of products are, for example, Microsoft Excel, which most of us use in this environment, allows us to be able to take and develop something that we want to have, say maybe a salesperson get in the field all the time. Maybe it's an updated price list and he doesn't want to log in the system all the time, but he wants the spreadsheet available. You could actually have that where it automatically updates on a periodic basis, or when he logs in, it automatically refreshes the data within the spreadsheet without him having to do an export import type scenario or just export to a spreadsheet. So he can actually do it from the spreadsheet and do that. And then the second part about the OData integration is that it actually follows the security setups you have within the system. So he can't access something that he's not supposed to normally. Additionally, some people can use the OData for something like Power BI for Microsoft to help integrate with that. And so that integration is all included in the product out of the box. That becomes important, okay? And those are part of the criteria you guys should look at. Additionally, the reliability of the product. What's it built on? Is it built on a stable environment? In this case here, we're built on SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server with C#. It's well known. We're on AWS for the hosting environment, which gives a tremendous amount of uptime. It's got multiple facilities so for reliability. So if something happens, it ends up, it's a scenario where it will actually pick up again, and you won't even know from an end user standpoint if one of the AWS sites went down. That being said, we haven't had any unscheduled downtime for any of our clients over the 5 or 6 years we've carried the product. Vendor support, it's not only how fast they respond, okay, it's how knowledgeable the people who respond are. Okay, and with Acumatica, in the case, and why this is kind of important, you designate the priority of the case, meaning when you put it in, and then basically they'll respond on that. So we actually had a situation where one of our customers, they have their own development environment because they have a very specialized industry, and they have developers. And on a Thursday afternoon at 5 o'clock, I received a call from them saying, "Hey, our data all disappeared." Okay, and I'm like, "That's crazy." So I log in, I look at it. Sure enough, their core data had disappeared. So I put a customer case into Acumatica saying customer down. A couple minutes later, I received a email, and then a moment later, I received a phone call from the support technician. And what he said was, it looked like somebody was restoring the database. So I called the client. The client says, "Well, we don't know anything about that." And we kind of go back and forth for a moment. And I asked the question to the technician. I say, "Do you have who's doing it?" and he named the user in Acumatica that had done the restore. Or is doing the restore. And in talking with him, it's like, oh, so that's one of the people at the client's one of the developers. What we discovered was one of the developers, instead of restoring in their development environment, had restored in the live environment. So it kind of wiped out the data as we went. So what we ended up doing once we determined the issue, we kind of went back and forth. And ultimately, about 25 minutes later, their data was totally restored. They were back up and running. So that becomes an important facility. And so that timeliness is important, but also somebody that can understand what's going on and how it works, okay, and what we need to do. And that's kind of happened over and over. So if you have an actual customer down, they're very responsive. There's also ways you can set up low priority things that respond in a couple of days. It's not critical. But the idea of it is, they're there. Secondarily, we're here as a kind of a multi-layer of support. So you have more than one support layer to help you. We usually know your organization's setup and structure and the personalities involved to be able to help you a little bit more directly. Additionally, Acumatica is a very accessible organization. John Roskell is the CEO of the organization. And if you go to like Acumatica Summit, I've actually spoken with him. He's actually there. He's actually mingling with people, both end users and customers, as well as the partners. And it's kind of an important aspect of how the company operates and their accessibility. In addition, there's been a few times I've actually just emailed him a couple of questions and he's responded. It's, very, very enlightening to work with. The other thing that you guys should really kind of look for is customizability. Is the product, if you need to do that, if you have to do customization for some reason, it could be as simple as adding a specialized report and all that, but it's a scenario of, okay, is it upgradable? Okay, we've all seen systems in the past where what ended up happening was, oh, it's great, it does exactly what you want, but now they came out with a new version of some additional functionality you might need for various purposes, could be tax purposes, other reasons that changes. For example, in the last year, we've had 1099 changes that required even some core functionality changes in accounting. So it came back to a scenario where having upgradability in a painless way becomes very important. So you need to kind of watch that and make sure of what really happens, okay? The other part is most systems now, or some of the better systems, have built-in support for dashboards and KPIs. They become part of a working report scenario, as well as a working way to go through the system, help you identify the things you actually need to work on versus running a report and then typing in the item over here and those kind of things. So you'll see that these dashboards become very powerful within the system. That should be true. And then the strong third-party support. If you do have a specific industry, for example, there's an add-on for Acumatica for real estate management. Okay, so if you are very specific to that, they have an add-on for that that builds on the functionality that's in the system already for like project and construction and adds on to that. So it becomes a very important part. And then last but not least, the value of the product. Okay, in the case of Acumatica, they're a little unique in the sense that the product is not licensed by individual user counts or end user names. It's actually licensed by the functionality requirements and the consumption. What they mean by that is they want to make sure the size of the system is set up properly for transactional volumes you might incur. So if you are lower transactional volume versus higher transactional volume, they want to make sure the performance works well. So the idea is the value becomes very important. So it's not necessarily how much you pay for the system, it's what value you get. The thing that we find in the real world, what that enhances, it allows us to make sure that the people should be involved, like for example, in workflow approvals and things like that, are the proper people. When you start having scenarios where people start thinking about the hey, we don't have a license for this guy and he does 2 approvals a month, and then they start skipping them or have somebody else do his approvals. The problem is the system gets partially broke. So this way we can actually have that person do his own approvals and we don't have to worry about buying another license for him. So it becomes very critical over time for those types of things. So why Acumatica? We're going to talk about this a little bit more in depth. So if you take a look, Acumatica is actually a global company. All right, and you might even seen some of the other products that are out there that are actually using their development environment. So in this case here, like MYOB, they are actually developed using the Microsoft ERP, and they're based upon that, and they have developed their own product, and they're primarily in Asia, and they're out of Australia. So it kind of gives you kind of that idea, and there's some other ones that are similar, like Visma and ACO and some of the others. So it's kind of an important part of it. If you take a look in the background, you can see here the different places around the world where they have people. So you can see here you have engineering and support services, et cetera. So it's not like you're going to be working out of one particular area. They're based out of Redmond, Washington. That's their corporate headquarters, so worldwide, but you get kind of the sense of it. It becomes kind of an important factor. Okay, so it helps when we're trying to get things done 24/7. They have, an open office somewhere for support as we need it. Okay, what we're all kind of going through is kind of the digital transformation. Okay, if you've been in the world long enough, you've been in analog businesses, right, where basically everything was done on paper, or even parts of the organization still done on paper. And then you kind of went through a modern technology piece, and now what they're going through is kind of that next step of digital business. And what that means is that you kind of take a step at a time where you're kind of expanding upon that modern technology to build additional functionality and to help improve your functionality in AI to be able to automate a lot of those processes. So it's kind of taking a next step. So that's kind of what they have ability. So one of the best paths is actually taking that digital economy and kind of reeling it up. So it has to do with integration, has to do with artificial intelligence to be able to do certain process for you on an automated basis, et cetera. So that's kind of the idea behind the process. If you take a look, we have different things here, okay, different rankings from different analysis groups. In this case here, we have IDC. Okay, you notice here, Acumatica is one of the leaders in the mid-market cloud ERP systems. Okay, and they're doing it based on strategies and capabilities. You notice the ones above us, in this case, are Oracle and SAP. Nice products, but they're roughly 10 times the price of Acumatica. So the idea of it is we're offering kind of that very high amount of functionality and leadership that comes with much higher priced products overall. If we take a look at ease of use, becomes an important aspect. This one's happened to be by Nucleus Research. And if you take a look about how customers relate their product and how end users relate to their product, and you can see here that Acumatica actually has a higher ability for usability than everybody. And it's because it is an easy product to use. It has a lot of flexibility, but it's very easy. So making use of that product becomes easier. Okay, and it thinks more like a lot of the accounting users does. Okay, and this is actually back in June 2020. They've actually had 2 major releases since then. So their functionality quadrants actually moved ahead a little bit. And that's going to be coming out in the not too distant future. If we go a little bit further, you'll see here, user sentiment. How do people feel about the product? If you go to Acumatica Summit, one of the things you find is that people have a very positive attitude about the product and the organization itself. And that sounds like a minor detail, but it makes a lot, it really does help everybody. It becomes a scenario where people really like the product. They really like how it works for them. If you notice, they're really up there on that, and they're really kind of ahead of so many other organizations that way as to how people feel about the product. And then they've won several of these over and over again. PC Editor's Choice, they've won for Best Manufacturing Solution, ERP Solution for ERP for the last 4 or 5 years now. So this is actually a consistent award that they've won from PC Magazine and Cody Awards because the development environment works so well. Additionally, customer satisfaction usability, they are actually the highest ranked from Gartner Group. Okay, so kind of keep in mind that there's some really nice pieces there. So it's not just me saying it. A lot of other people that do analysis in the industry are also recognizing that as well. So what are some of the differentiators for Acumatica? One is the technology leadership and the future proof of their platform. We're going to talk about that in more detail. The business class, the amount of functionality that's available for the product directly from the vendor. It's not where you add on this third-party product to get this and that third party to get that. It's a nice feature set that they have and that they've built. And then the ethical business practices. This is one of those that's hard to kind of describe, but when you see it, right? And one of the great things about the Acumatica company to work with is that you'll find you actually have a bill of rights with Acumatica. And so you're not going to get any shocking pricing increases and those kind of things that some of the other vendors have done over time. So let's go to the next step. So we're talking about the future proofing of the platform. And what it comes down to is we have kind of the different pieces of it. And what happens is when we say future proof, what does that mean? One of the best examples I have is when HTML5 came out, okay, and they changed kind of that piece of that that block, okay. What ended up happening is they literally took this block out that was there before, and they put HTML5, the HTML5 block in its place. They didn't have to recode anything. They didn't have to recode which database and how it wrote to SQL. They didn't have to recode the actual platform. They didn't have to recode any of the functional parts of the product, which are the parts at the top where you see different additions and functionality. What they did is they unplugged it, plugged it back in, and HTML5 was there. Okay, they've done the same thing with adding different parts of functionality, or as they updated the mobile network or that piece of it. Those have all kind of just been literally an unplug and a plug. For browser support, same thing. If once in a while one of the browsers comes out with an update where all of a sudden, they've done something to security, they've made other changes, we have to update the code. They literally just unplug that piece, plug that back in, and we're up and running. And basically the end user doesn't even know in general terms. But the idea is it's very much built into components that can easily be updated and not have to update the whole system at once. You can actually do this piece and that piece, okay? So it makes it a lot more functional. So the idea of it is that future-proofs you, not only from the standpoint of functionality, making sure we keep up with requirements for tax purposes and things like that, or actual new functionality required in your industry, but also as things change on a technical basis, we just plug that in, plug it out. And from an end user standpoint, you may or may not notice a difference depending upon that. But the idea of it is it allows you to keep up with the technology over a longer period of time. These systems are in use for an average of 13 years. Okay, when you actually implement a ERP product, it's not one of those that you implement and you're done and you're only going to use it for 6 months. You typically, on average, are 13 years. We actually have clients that have used the product on the GP side, for example, about 20 or 25 years now. So to give you an idea, there can be different averages to that. But that's kind of the key. You pick the right product, you can get more longevity out of it and avoid that pain of a new implementation. And then also, at the same time, keep up with the technology that you need to have to keep up with your competitors, as well as making your organization more efficient. Okay, so flexible deploy options. I'm only going to talk about this briefly. About 97% of Acumatica is in the AWS cloud with Acumatica as a SaaS offering. You can do an internal host if you're in a particular industry where it requires that. You can actually install it and basically have a private cloud, whether it's local or in another area. So for example, you can do it on Azure, you can do it in another private cloud of your choosing. So they have some different options for that. Let's go on to the next one. And part of the reason they picked AWS is it's the most reliable cloud. Okay, and if you take a look at it, here, if you look at the AWS web services, you notice they're far away executed where they need to be as far as technology. And if you notice, they're actually keeping ahead even as far as the vision of where they're going to go and how much is available to us functionality wise. Now, we don't have to worry about the cloud per se because Acumatica is managing that for us, but the key to it is they need to be on the proper basis to manage that for us and get the functionality that we want from that technical environment and that hosting environment. So that's why they picked AWS. Security is important to all these. We all kind of hear things like that. There's multiple security, there's multi-level security. You can tie into some other security providers like AWS AD or Microsoft AD, those kind of things, Google, those kind of things if you want. There's multi-level authentication if you want. It depends how you want to set it up, but we recommend some of those depending upon your organization. So those become important parts. The last part about the security I'm just going to talk briefly is that one of the things that we found is we've had a few clients over the last couple of years get hit with ransomware on their network. And one of the things that we've discovered is that with this being in the cloud and the way it's structured, you're not immune to it entirely, but it's a lot harder to have an infection hurt you as far as your ERP software. So we haven't had any issues with it where you could possibly have a document or two that get infected, but the bottom line is we haven't had that occur. So it becomes an important aspect of how things work. And the way the product is structured, it'd be really difficult for that to occur. But to give you an idea, the one client was down, by the time they finally got back to normal, it was about 6 weeks. So they really had to actually rebuild their servers from scratch. So if they had been on this particular product, their ERP piece would have kept going without issue. Okay. BI and analytics. Okay. So if you notice here, we have different ways to do analytics. We have our own dashboard features that are built into the product. But if you don't like those or you want additional ones or you need some others, here we have everything from Excel, BI 360, which is another product, Tangerine, Valexio. We have Power BI, Tableau. they can all integrate into us and basically read the information directly for that. Some of those also offer sophisticated budgeting capabilities. For example, BI 360. So if you have something where you have a lot of structure to your budgeting process and approvals, as well as maybe it's done on headcounts, a whole bunch of other options, you can actually implement their software and some of the others actually as well. I'm just using that as an example to actually feed the budget information into Acumatica for comparison, as well as do financial reporting and adjustments. Oops, sorry. If you go a little bit further, you can access for anywhere. Okay, when I say that, I don't know how much you're going to actually use in your watch because the the screen is a little bit small. It is capable of doing that though, which is kind of important. So if you take a look at, notice here we have our typical desktop. There's actually an app for that runs on smaller devices like your smartphone. It actually uses the exact same software. It just presents it slightly differently in the app because if you look at the screen real estate, you don't have all of that capability. But if you want to on your cell phone, you can actually run it through the browser on your cell phone in a really tiny format and scroll back and forth or make it bigger and kind of scroll back and forth. It will actually run the software. So if you're running on a Android tablet, for example, or an iPad, it's straightforward to do. You notice here over on the right, they have Alexa. You can actually give commands to the software if you want through Alexa. For various purposes, a whole series of commands that kind of tie into the product. So you have a lot of flexibility as to what you can run on. Doesn't matter if it's Linux, whatever, as long as you have a browser and internet connectivity. Okay. Go a bit further. I mentioned this a little bit before, as far as the connectivity between the modules, as far as what's there. In this case here, what we're talking about though is if you have a workflow that's for approvals, for example, maybe you're in construction or maybe you're in manufacturing and something gets generated in manufacturing, they need to approve the production order, then maybe that needs to set up and approve some purchase orders that kind of go through there. That cross-module workflow can actually be automated and then send out the different approvals for those different documents as are required. And that becomes kind of an important piece. So it's not just a workflow of, oh, how do I do this? It could be actually tying multiple workflows together as you go through the organization. Okay. We talked a little bit about AI and machine learning, artificial intelligence, and basically this is just starting in the industry, and Acumatica actually has it released in parts of their product already, and there's more of it coming with each initial release. We're actually on 2020 or 2021 R1, sorry, and with that, they're building more and more of this capability. So the idea is that zero-touch automation. If you have certain things with certain criteria that happen continually, we can actually set up an automation flow for that so they'll automatically do that. So for example, at the end of the day, if you want the system to automatically email your invoices to your customers, you can actually have the system kick that off at 3 o'clock in the morning. You can have it do it, every 20 minutes, whatever you want to do. You can set up that automation to send those informations out and then post that through all the way to your AR module if you want. Okay, so there's kind of different options for that. That's just one small example. Interactive assistance. Basically, if you start using the help system within Acumatica, it actually has AI built into it. So as you do searches and it watches what you click on, it'll eventually get more efficient for you because it's based upon you and AI learning that is built into the system. And then the intelligent advisor is part of that other side of that, where certain information gets kicked out or presented to you based upon the learning of the system over time to actually say, hey, what about? Okay, and so these things are coming and are here, and but it's coming in the whole industry. But it's with Acumatica, we have a lot of this built in already, and it's a scenario where they're expanding it each version, but it is coming there. So it's there. We talked about functionality. Okay, that becomes an important aspect of it. And so, they've gotten quite a few awards for the different functionality throughout the product. These are the core products. So we have financial management, which includes AR, AP, general ledger, bank reconciliation, bank integration for like reconciling credit cards from, expense reports and things like that from the built-in system. You have project accounting, just what it sounds like. You have a scenario where if you have actual projects you want to track costing on and bill and things like that, it's built into the system as part of the core product. Inventory management with multiple warehouses, a lot of capability to be able to do various reporting feeds, manufacturing, inventory, also feeds like construction if possible, if you wanted to. So it does a bunch of different areas. They have customer management. It's a scenario where that's built in. So basically you can actually do tracking of your proposals and your opportunities, and then have that tie in when it gets accepted in one to create the sales order, for example, to be processed, to be fulfilled. So it's kind of an integrated piece. And last but not least, on the core products, they have payroll. And payroll's not exciting unless you're in some of the industries that want to track payroll in detail. For example, if you track payroll for projects, or you track it for construction, those types of things. If we take a look at the different industry areas or industry editions, we have a field service edition, which basically does route accounting and field service. Okay. We have a commerce edition, which allows us to automatically integrate to several different products out there for web sales coming in for e-commerce. We have construction edition, which is just what it sounds like. If you're in the construction industry and you do subcontracting or general contracting, we have a construction edition, which handles like AI billing and things. We have the distribution edition, which has some basic WMS, warehouse management system built into it, as well as being able to have multiple warehouses across the country, those kind of things, and being able to be fed from sales orders and purchase orders as we go through in various documents. And that again ties into construction. You can actually use inventory items on construction depending what you're doing and how you're doing it. And last but not least, we actually have the manufacturing edition, which builds upon the distribution edition and adds on to it the ability to run MRP, engineering change analysis, and things like that to be able to work in the manufacturing edition industry. So we're AI CPA compliant. So basically we're pretty straightforward that way. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. We have the customer bill of rights, and I mentioned that real quick. And there's a couple pieces that are kind of key to this. One is you have kind of the SaaS user, being able to understand the EULA, and the EULA is actually fairly short compared to most companies. It's basically a page. It's kind of like one of those things. It's more of a comfortable handshake. We'll put it that way. But the idea is, open platform for being able to easily integrate. One of the keys, though, is the sustainable pricing, meaning that, I got to go back. There we go. Sorry, sustainable pricing, because typically the initial contract will be for a few years or 3 years, and so your pricing is even locked in for the full 3 years. But even when you reach that end of 3-year point, your pricing is guaranteed not to go up more than 3%. Okay, so if you haven't changed your requirements for what you want from them, basically you're not going to get dinged for 100% increase. And I've seen that occur with some of the vendors out there. The other part is that you have the ownership and access to their data. We don't like to think you're ever going to leave Acumatica, but if you do, okay, the key to it is we've all left systems, and then we end up having to, we have to have a kind of a straggler out there for end users. Two things happen. One is, a lot of the cloud systems, we'll give you your data electronically. And that sounds great until they dump out a bunch of text files for you, and then how do you use them? Because you no longer have the software. So what a lot of people do is they narrow down their contract, and then they keep a user or 5 users on the old system so they can reference back. With Acumatica, you can actually use this for development, but also for if you decide to exit from the software as an exit strategy. You can actually download the database, because we can actually they do backups and all, but we can actually do snapshots of the data, bring it down, put it into a trial system, install that locally, and then load that data in there. And then you would be able to have that system in Acumatica, so you could still reference it normally. It would just be restricted to 2 users at the same time. So that's kind of the idea behind it. All right. We talked about the 24/7 customer support, important part, and then kind of the dual layers of support, which would be Acumatica as well as us. So the idea is, this is what they think is kind of important for an end user customer. And I agree. I think those are all important. If you take a look, one of the important parts is, as your organization grows, not only with volume perhaps, but also with functionality requirements, or maybe your organization changes, et cetera. This product has the growth, and it has the ability to hit so many different industries, it will probably easily adapt for you. And that sounds like a minor detail, but if you're using the product for 13 or 15 or 20 years, those become important factors. Okay, so that's kind of the thought process on that and how it goes. All right. So it kind of makes things a little bit simpler, okay, for planning. Data ownership, I just talked about that. You actually get your data. And in a lot of cloud systems, that does not occur. And that's one of the things I said. You could do that your own snapshot. Maybe you're doing a major update to your data, because we have ways to do mass updates through kind of the import utilities, and we want to test it and make sure everything's okay. And just do that snapshot just in case something goes wrong. We actually can do our own snapshots for whatever timing we want, and we're not dependent entirely on Acumatica. And that sounds like a minor detail until you need to do it. Do layer support, we talked about that. We have the Hudson River Computing as one, kind of your first layer of support, and then you have Acumatica as a backup, and not only to us, but also directly to you. Connected Cloud, there's a series of products out there. There's about 400 products now that are tied in. These are some of the ones that people recognize the names pretty straightforward. So, you take a look at, everything from HR products to Smartsheet to Power BI to DocuSign if you're using it, Avalara, which is for sales tax. There's a couple others out there as well. These are just some of the samples of some of the more popular ones. And what this means is these connections are pre-built. That being said, if it's a pre-built connection, we can also still adjust that connection to suit your requirements as necessary. Okay, so the idea of it is just giving an idea that there's a lot of pieces there. And the idea of it is we're not trying to have these islands of information, these different software products. Okay, and this is just a quick sample of some of the customers that are out there. There's quite a few organizations you may recognize, among others. Okay, so basically we're almost to the end. We're almost there. Okay, promise. You have connected business, they've delivered it, meaning that, it's all there. The rapid integrations, again, that's there. It's been there for a long time. The remote collaboration, being able to access remote systems, et cetera, it's there, it's been there, it's been delivered. The business resilience, again, we've actually had a good test of that in the last year. We went through with Acumatica without any hiccups at all for that. And then that future proofing, the upgradability and moving forward with the product. So just kind of wrap up on this part of it, is long-term commitment that we have to clients. We've worked with clients for a long period of time in most cases. We're not entirely centric to a particular product, but, today we talked about Acumatica, but we try to meet the client requirements to make sure the product's going to work for you. We have a high success rate for our implementations. We're usually, depending upon the purchase, we're usually under budget depending on the scenario, okay? We have ERP experience. We've been doing it for a long time, and so is Acumatica. That's what they've been developed. They're not, ERP is not a sideline from them as their primary business. Again, Acumatica, born in the cloud, okay? They know how to work with the cloud. And then access from anywhere, any device, and then flexible deployment options. That works with us as well as them. And then consumption-based. So the idea of it is between the combination of us, Hudson River Computing, and Acumatica, we end up with a great system for you to kind of work with. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop the presentation for the PowerPoint. You guys are probably glad that's done, okay? And what I'm going to do is actually go into Acumatica. Okay, so to get into Acumatica is relatively straightforward. You do a login, you pick your company or organization you're working in. These are different tenants that's licensed for you, so you can actually see them. This is the main menu. Typically, most people come into some type of dashboard. Okay, the dashboards tend to be interactive. So if we go across the menu here, we'll see a couple things. We have the home button basically, which brings me back to my dashboard again. I'm just clicking that to make sure I'm actually still logged in. I am, didn't time out. We have a scenario where we have a search ability, and this is a global search within Acumatica. It's kind of like Acumatica's global search. So if I type in JK1234, okay, and review that, you'll see it searches through all the menu items. It searches through transactions, through help topics, which we're not going to find any there. Oops, probably shouldn't have clicked on that. And then files. So it actually searches the file names that are attached in the system for that particular piece. So now if I click on this here, you'll see I did a global search, and this happens to go to a sales order, SO. And this is the sales order number it goes to, and it's for USA Bartending. Notice their customer order number is JK1234. If I click on that, it actually takes me directly to that particular sales order for review. And I can do whatever I need to for this particular sales order. So the idea of it is if the customer calls up, you're in the middle of something else, you type in that search, you can automatically find that if they give you a piece of information to work with, all right? So it becomes very powerful very quickly. I'm just going to click the home button again. Up here, if we have different divisions within our organization, this is where we say what division we're working in. Okay, we have date and time, pretty straightforward. We have the help menu, which we'll talk a little bit about when we get to an actual window. And this here, right now, if I click help, it'll give me help on dashboards because I'm sitting on a dashboard. Okay. Last but not least, my login information. I can set my profile information for time zones and which dashboards I want or what screen I want to open. Now, keep in mind, everything in here is a particular website. Okay, meaning that if I go through and I want to look at a particular transaction, I can actually forward that to somebody. So in this case here, I'm looking at the customer view. And you notice here, these are, this dashboard, this is a working dashboard. So I can say, oh, you know what, there's 7 orders to ship. There's 5 of them that are late. If I click on this, what it does is it shows me the orders that are actually in there. So in this case here, I can actually see the orders that are running late and I can click on it. If I want to say, yep, this one's ready to ship, I can click on this particular order and go through and say, yep, this one's ready to ship. We're past due, but that's okay. We actually finally have the product in. I can click create shipment, click OK. And if I have the product, it's going to create the shipment for me. I hope I have the product. Oops, I don't have the product. Uh-oh, bad choice. So the idea of it is what would happen is it would go to the next step and it would take it off the particular menu item. Shouldn't have done that one, I guess. But so you get kind of the rough idea. So, if you take a look, we can actually adjust these. So it's relatively straightforward. All right. So the idea is these are working dashboards. By the same token, if I look at orders to ship, I'll see there's some current ones and there's some out there that are past due. So here are the past due ones because I have them marked in red. That's configurable by the system, as you set it up. And then here are the ones that haven't been shipped yet, but they're still within, they're not overdue yet. So it's the idea of how that actually helps you work, okay? By the same token, if I click on any of these, okay, it actually takes me to the data. So in this case here, if I click June 2020 and I click this particular one here, you can see here, this is the data that makes that particular item up and I can drill down on it to go all the way back to the original transaction. Okay, so the idea of it is it becomes a powerful system for me to try to find my analysis, create warnings, create working scenarios, okay? Additionally, if you take a look at the items purchased in this case, we're gonna go to the donut down here, and I actually see this and say, okay, you know what, others taking up a lot of this, but it makes all the percentages kind of whacked out. I can actually click on this. If I take out the extra, and I'm going to take out the empty ones as well because there's no product number in there, I'm actually going to do the same thing for the empty. And now I actually have something that's a little more useful as far as what my percentages are for what items were purchased or sold in the last month from customers. So if I want to see what's the detail of, oh, you know what, an Acer computer. Now, I don't know if you guys noticed the products. I just think it's interesting. Everything from Sweet and Low to Ballpark Franks and hot dog buns to Acer computers. But we're going to look at the Acer computer. And at this point here, you'll see here, this represents those sales over that period of time for the Acer computer. And here's my inventory ID, so I can actually see that. And this is one of my top selling items. And again, I can go back to the transaction and drill all the way back. All right, so it becomes an important factor. Now, when I'm in these kind of windows, one of the beauties of it is I can actually, kind of rearrange this. Like, you know what, I use this a lot. I can actually drag it over here and put it over here toward the top, and I want to put the item code over there, and maybe I'm not too worried about the city, or maybe I want to sort by it just like you would in an Excel spreadsheet, or maybe I want to do a filter. Maybe in this case I only want to see items that are in PA, in Pennsylvania. So if I do that and click the OK, you notice here it's narrowed down my sales down to just the Pennsylvania area. So I can very quickly and easily do the analysis. A lot of times you would do in a spreadsheet, okay, kind of that rough analysis type thing. But if this is a continual thing that I need to do, notice over here, we have a tab over here where we saved one. So this is the key customers for the last 12 months. Okay, so basically this is the sales for 12 months for the top 12 customers. So that becomes kind of an important one. So it's fairly easy to actually code these filters and then have them there so we can use them over and over and over without doing the filter manually each time. So for the recurring pieces. By the same token, these are easy to create. So assuming I have rights, because everybody has different rights, I can click on design, and now I'm in design mode. Okay, I can drag and drop these around. I can add a new widget, which is what I'm going to do. So if I click add new widget, I can add a chart. I can do a display table, data table. I can do an embedded page, meaning I have an outside page. Maybe it's my bank page or whatever. I can embed it in here if I want. You can set up a header. So you can say, customer view or create sections to it and create a header for that particular section. You can do a meter or scorecard kind of thing as well. You can link to a workspace item, which is basically linking to a menu item. So if you want to link directly to the sales order window, you can do that, or you want to link directly to the general ledger window, you can do that for the entry. Pivot tables, you can actually link directly to pivot tables. The pivot tables are actually creatable within Acumatica. Okay, so you can actually kind of twist the data around if you guys are familiar with pivot tables. Works basically the same way it does in Excel. If you're not familiar with pivot tables, even Excel, if you get nothing else out of today, learn how to do pivot tables. You'll use it all the time. Okay, Power BI tile, if we have a scenario where we're using Microsoft Power BI, we can actually display the results of a BI tile directly in Acumatica, and then we can do a trend or we can do a wiki page. So we can easily do all these. So what I'm going to do today is actually a chart. And I'm going to click next. And I'm going to say what inquiry screen. Now, this part, you're going to have to kind of know what you're looking for. So I'm going to do invoiced items. Okay. So this is how you can do a quick search. So here's my invoiced items. I'm going to click select. So that's going to be my basis for my widget, okay, for what I'm going to do for this. Well, I don't want all records. Remember a minute ago, we just looked at key customers over the last 12 months. That's what we're going to use, which means we get to use that again. So it's not just in my filter on that particular listing. I can actually use that filter to then use that on my widget or my graph in this case. If I go to here, I can see what that particular item is, and I can go ahead and readjust it. Okay, I can actually, kind of make it narrower, wider as far as its inquiry. How often do I want the data to refresh? It can be one of those where it refreshes once a day. It can be on continual. It depends upon the scenario. Okay, I'm going to do every 30 minutes. And then I'm going to configure it. Okay, what kind of chart type do I want? Well, I can do donuts and line graphs and stacks, etc., funnels. I'm going to do a donut. I'm going to pick a legend. So I'm going to do it by customer name. All right, and so it's going to say, okay, descending value by the name. And I'm going to go here and say, what value do I want to pull in? Well, I'm looking for total sales dollars in this case, right, by a particular customer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go by amount, and I'm going to pick the extended amount. Okay, so that's going to be the extended amount of the invoice. Do I round to the nearest penny? Do I want to round to the nearest dollar? I'm going to round to the nearest dollar. That's probably sufficient. And then last but not least, I can actually pick whether it's an average or a sum. I'm going to do sum. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to name it. Okay. I'm going to call it JK test key customers 12 months. Okay. Just so you can see I didn't cheat. So now I'm going to click finish. And what's going to do, if I come down here, it's going to actually create this. Now I can resize this because I'm still in design mode. And I can easily say, yep, I want it to be that size. Scroll down a little bit. I can then, oops, I got to let go with the mouse a little bit more. There we go. And then from here, I can actually go out of, not out of design yet. I can, what is going on? Okay, so I can actually go and click on design, take it out of design mode. So now if you notice, I just created this JK test, and I can click on any one of these and I have my drill down. So if I click on USA Bartending School, you'll see that here's my USA Bartending School. And those are those sales for that period of time. At this point, if I want, I can easily export it to Excel for further analysis or to send it to somebody, and away it goes. So it's going to take a second here. And depending upon what browser will depend upon how it's going to work a little bit. So right now, what's going to happen, I have it set up so that it prompts me to open it. And so it's going to want to save it first somewhere. Okay, and then basically at this point, it's going to pop open my Excel spreadsheet. And in typical Excel fashion, it's going to be, you have to enable it. And then at this point, numbers are numbers, letters are letters, dates are dates, and you can do what you want to do with this data, and it's strictly in Excel. Okay, so it becomes very powerful very quickly along the way. Okay, so if we go a little bit further, the other thing that you can pretty easily do here is some things that you can do with these listings. You notice over here, if I click on bartending school, there's a little arrow over here. This will show me different information that pertains to that row. Okay, so in this case here, this is the customer master for USA Bartending School. If I had a different customer there, it would show it for the other customers. So if I actually go to all records from the drill down, I can actually pick on, Artage's art cages, and you'll see here it automatically changes. Now those could be, in this case here, we're looking at the customer master, but that could be where we see transactions, aging, could be opportunities if you're using customer CRM modules, those kind of things. So the idea of it is you can actually have a whole series of these things that link to that line item from the invoiced items. And that's configurable throughout the system. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my customer view. And so you can see here how easy it was to change that KPI. Additionally, we can do these filters so that they work for a specific customer. Notice up here is a customer ID. Again, this is user configurable. I'm going to do USA bartending. And let me do a link on. So I'm going to type and select it. You notice here, now what it's doing, it's actually updating the whole web page or this particular dashboard for the customer view for USA bartending. So that's how easy it is to make those kind of changes. So you notice down the number of orders, the ship went down to 2, you have 1 late order, et cetera, as you go through. So it becomes very powerful and works very well for people. If I take that back out, again, I can take that back out. Now you could do that for, in this case, just for a specific customer. But you could do similar things like that for customer classes, item classes, those kind of things, depending on the dashboard you're on. So you have a lot of flexibility in how you do your reporting. To give you an idea, if you take a look at the dashboards window, out of the box, these are the base dashboards that come with the system. Okay, and then it can either be modified or you can create your own from scratch. So I'm looking at customer view, but if I look at warehouse manager or purchasing manager, or shipping clerk, if I click on that, what happens is these dashboards out of the box are tailored toward them. Okay, so in the case here where if there's a shipment that's created and needs to go out the door, they would actually see this on the shipment side. Okay, if I go to the accounts receivable clerk, it shows me information that's related to accounts receivable. So in this case here, I'm looking at, oh, gee, I have unreleased documents I need to do. Maybe I have, can look at cash flow I'm expecting. I can look at invoices to email. Gee, I need to go in and do that. And you can do those in mass, or you can do them one at a time, depending on your scenario, what you're doing. And again, you can see here your average days for sales outstanding and things like that. So that's all for the AR module. If you take a look at the controller, again, they have a different KPI listing that pertains to them, what they're worried about. Cash on hand, cash position, could be anything else along the way as well. We see common like, what's the sales orders taken in, those kind of things. So it becomes very powerful very quickly. And just to show you a different type of a particular item, we have a flow dashboard as well. And this is popular for certain organizations, for certain types of individuals. But the nice part about it is not only does it show the flow, but it actually shows and takes you to that particular item. So in this case here, under financial, if I go to bills, it will actually take me to that bills window. Okay, so it becomes very powerful. So I can then enter my accounts payable bill, okay, or voucher. If I go to something like sales orders, how the window normally looks, if I click on sales orders, you'll see here's a listing of all my sales orders. I can easily search for the sales order. I can do it by name. I can do it by dollar amounts. I can do it by whatever. I'm actually going to say bartending. So it's going to put everything in. It has BAR in it because that's what I typed up here, and it just searches the whole list. Now, if I look at this and say, yep, that's the one I want, I can actually click on it. And one of the powers throughout the system is that, you remember how we dragged and dropped the columns around before? I can do the same thing here. I can resize these columns. I can move them around. I can actually create filters here for different types of items. So I want to do that. I can come down through and say, yep, I want to move the amount over to here. I can actually drag and drop it over to there. I can rearrange the columns to suit my data entry requirements or reviews. By the same token, if I want to take the discount amounts out because I don't offer discounts, I can actually do that. I can come in here and just literally take and remove these discounts out of the list. Oops, you actually have to click the right arrow. Sorry, I misclicked and I got to go back to the top here. So I got to go back to discounts. And if you come down through, I can remove all those discount codes. Manual discount, unit price, etc. Click OK. You notice all those discount fields just disappeared. All right. Now the fields will just adjust based on what you have installed. Also, if you don't have security to a window, like if I go to the menu here for the sales order window, if you're not allowed to do sales orders, you won't have sales orders on your window. And that's true throughout the system. So the system becomes very tailored to you. By the same token, you can become very efficient with this. So if I take a look at, hey, I do sales orders all the time, I can click on favorites. And if I do customer maintenance, I can do that in the favorites. And why these favorites are important is you can do favorites basically by creating web pages and saying, oh yeah, I want to go to XYZ page. So if you notice here, this is the exact page that I'm sitting on in the sales order. But the issue is if you create that favorite in your browser, it doesn't travel with you a lot of times if you go from machine to machine or device to device. Okay. The nice part about this is you can log on this with any machine. Okay. And these favorites will travel with you. Okay. Meaning that, hey, I need to do these 10 things every day. These are my 10 things. Okay, so it gives you another way to kind of get there very effectively. If I don't like that to be a favorite anymore, maybe I don't do customers very often anymore, I can literally take it off my favorites list from here, or I can do it from the menu itself and click and adjust it. So you can tailor these menus very effectively for what you do on a regular basis. Something that's common throughout the system is we have the ability to put notes on the screen. Okay, kind of neat, and that's true for all transactions. By the same token, I can put notes on line items where it's a bit, we have line items. Same thing, we can do attachments. Okay, to do an attachment, I can actually just grab a file and I can just literally drag it onto there, and you notice I have my file attached. Okay, so it's relatively straightforward. Any activities that happen, if I happen to go through and say, yep, I want to, let's do this. Let's create this as a new one. I'm going to copy the sales order. Okay, and then I'm going to paste this sales order. I'm going to click plus to create a new one, and now I'm going to paste it. I've actually created a document from another document. You can do that very easily along the way. Now notice there's a quick pop-up. This is from the customer. It says collect 50% down payment on all special orders. So they probably had some kind of issue with this particular customer along the way, as well as this being a special order item. Again, in this case, I copied my notes like I just did. I can click save. I'm going to change the date. I'm going to put it in at 4/28. Okay. Oops, you have to type right, which I didn't. There we go. And I'm going to click save. So now I've just created a brand new order from the existing one. At this point, I'm going to email it to them. I'm going to click this. I'm going to say email the sales order. It looks good. Away it goes. It automatically emails the order out. By the same token, I can actually enter a batch of these orders, and I can automate that where I say, you know what, once I save the order and release it from hold, it automatically sends out the confirmation. All right, that's a setup issue as to how you work it. So that makes it a very powerful system. And additionally, instead of doing it through somebody's Outlook email where only one person may know or can look at the history, this activity is then stored with this particular document. So not only do I have that where it emails out, attaches the PDF of what the file is, what the sales order is, and basically pulls it all together. So this is true throughout the system, makes it very powerful. And again, these steps can be automated versus forcing them to be done manually. All right, so it kind of gives you a rough idea of how that all works. To give you an idea, the email did get to me, okay, because I emailed myself. And you'll notice here, here's the email that I received. Here's my document in a PDF. Oops, okay. So that's how easy it is to actually have those things kind of occur within the system. And that's true throughout. Makes it very powerful. All right, so we've covered a lot of material today. We said we're going to keep it to an hour. We're trying to just give you kind of a flavor of what the system can do. Obviously, we can do things like, take it from sales order all the way down to cash receipt, those kind of things. That's obviously here. But I just wanted to give you kind of a flash of kind of what it looks like and introduce what who Acumatica is and who Hudson River Computing is. So I'm going to kind of open up the questions if anybody has any. We can kind of review that and kind of go from there. So if you have any questions, you can go to Q&A or raise your hand, and we can go from there. Did I put everybody to sleep? Is that what's happened? So anyway, we'll wait a moment. And if there's no questions, what we can do is we can then take and adjourn, and I can follow up with you on any questions you may have. Oh. Yep. Thank you, Brian. So it's hard to cover everything. You know how that goes. But we're, like I said, we're just trying to give you a flavor for it. Okay. You don't have to ask just about the product. You can ask about Hudson River Computing. I've heard of the company before. I kind of been here a while. So, okay. Okay, we're gonna adjourn then, and I appreciate everybody for coming. If you have any additional questions, feel free to contact us. And